My guest today on Deep CV Diving is London-based Heather Vadgama, the CMO of Walkers, one of the world's leading global offshore law firms. Starting her professional services career as a marketing assistant in a role that I placed her into 22 years ago, we hear in this interview how her career has taken her around the world, from Australia via Asia to the UK, and how her pursuit of becoming a CMO was made possible by taking a role in Pursuits. How did she get there? Let's dive in and find out. Welcome, Heather.
Hello, Graham. It's great to be here.
Okay, so let's go to the beginning of your CV, where you studied a management degree with a marketing focus. I'm interested, did it prove useful?
It's proved really useful throughout my career. So very early on, I learned all about customer segmentation, various business strategies, and that's been with me throughout my career. The tourism and Japanese elements of my studies didn't quite help me out as much, but the marketing and the business management definitely.
Why was there tourism and Japanese in a management degree?
Back in Australia in the 90s, there was a huge influx of Japanese tourists.
Okay.
And it was a really exciting industry to be in. So a sector I'd always wanted to work for. And that's where I started off my career, actually, is in tourism and services marketing.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask you about that. So your first real job, tell me about your first real job.
So it was as a PA in the marketing team of the Melbourne Convention and Marketing Bureau. So they were a destination marketing company trying to attract conferences and tourists into Melbourne in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
I got that role basically because I'd done some volunteer work while I was at university with Ballarat Tourism, which is a small city in Australia. And the director of Ballarat Tourism had moved to Melbourne Convention and Marketing Bureau, was looking for a PA, and called me up because he'd been impressed with the work I did during my volunteer stint working with him. So really great opportunity for me because I, from very day one of my career, was working with senior leadership and the C-suite and involved in strategic meetings and pitching for new business. So it was a fantastic experience for me.
Did you? I'm interested. So you did a degree in management and marketing, but you took a job as a PA.
I really needed to get a foot on the ladder. My parents didn't work in the city in banking or any of the traditional sort of business sectors. And so I had no network to call upon to get a job. And so really for me, it was just grabbing hold of the first opportunity I could just to get my foot in the door and see what I could learn.
Were you ambitious? I mean, it sounds like it, but did you feel ambitious at the time?
Absolutely. I think from a small child, I'd always wanted and dreamt about working in the city in a big skyscraper, and always just wanted to, I guess, get to where I am today as a CMO in an organization. But, always looking at where the next opportunity is, where I can get some new skills and some new experience to build upon in my career.
See, you've answered my next question, which was going to be, because your next job after that was as a marketing coordinator with Baker McKenzie in Melbourne. So you sort of joined professional services very early on in your career. So can you remember why you wanted that job and how important that job was to you at the time?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know anything about the legal sector when I first moved into that role. By that stage, I'd worked in tourism for 3 or 4 years and felt that it wasn't where I wanted to be forever. I wanted to get more involved in the world and in, sort of what was happening with all of these big international companies that were operating in Melbourne. And this opportunity came up, and it was at a time when legal marketing was really in its infancy, I think, in Australia. It was a very small team at Baker McKenzie, and I was the first marketing coordinator they had for the Melbourne office. So really exciting opportunity. Didn't really know what that would entail and whether my skills and my experience would help me out, but thought, just take a leap of faith and try and get there. So yeah, it was a really exciting opportunity and my chance to go and work in one of those big skyscrapers.
Well, I was about to say, because so tell me about your first day walking through the doors. How did you feel?
Very nervous. I really had no idea. I'd never spoken to a lawyer in my life. So walking in the door and into this complete unknown world was quite daunting, actually. But luckily, I had a fantastic boss and mentor who was up in Sydney, who, sort of really looked after me and walked me through the ropes, and found actually a lot of the skills I'd picked up in tourism of organising events and writing copy for brochures was directly transferable. Different service, but directly transferable, and quickly got my feet under the table and really enjoyed it.
And did your PA skills help you in working with more senior people in the firm?
Absolutely. I think the exposure that I'd had in my first job working with the C-line or C-suite and, sort of senior people from other organisations meant I knew the types of conversations they were having, the decisions that they were making. So I was very comfortable going and knocking on the door of partners and sitting down with them and talking through what they needed, what they were hoping to achieve with their business plans at the time. So, I think it immediately gave me that comfort. In Australia, it's also a different culture. It's much more sort of collegiate and, talking to peers than, some European cultures or Asian cultures even. So, we were talking much more on an equal footing.
I'm pausing the interview here to take my first deep dive into what she has said so far. There are some interesting observations about how she owned her ambition and confidence, but this didn't mean she wasn't scared. Her first job as a PA executive assistant gave her exposure to senior people straight away, and this access to leadership and being party to the conversations they were having and the projects they were working on was incredibly important, and as we hear later, enabled her to become a good leader of people. It's a common mistake that some early career candidates make to decline roles that they consider too junior or too admin-focused, believing they can be strategic straight away. But a common theme from these interviews is that starting at ground level provides the best and most solid platform from which to elevate your career. Let's return to the interview. And then after just 16 months of being in a marketing coordinator role in your first skyscraper in Melbourne, you moved to Hong Kong. I mean,
Yes.
how did that come about?
I had always had ambitions to work overseas at some point in my career. I had spent time as an exchange student just after high school before I went to university and really wanted to be part of the world. Australia, for me, felt domestic and a little bit isolated in a way from what you would see on the front page of the newspaper. And so an opportunity came up in Hong Kong. Somebody was moving and getting promoted into a new role. And I just put my hand up and said, I'd be interested in doing a job like that if something ever came up. And, next thing I knew, I was being interviewed, and about 6 weeks later moved to Hong Kong. I'd never stepped foot in the place, but again, I thought, take the risk. If it doesn't work out, I can always come back again.
And I suppose that I mean, at the time, Baker McKenzie was probably the only law firm in Australia that could facilitate a move to another country, but it was still very unusual at the time for marketing people to be able to apply internally for jobs. So you were quite fortunate, I suppose, that you were at Baker McKenzie and it facilitated that move. But I'm curious to know, when you got there, having never been there before, having never lived there or worked there before, what were the differences, firstly, between Baker McKenzie Melbourne, Baker McKenzie Hong Kong?
I mean, the biggest difference was the culture. The first few weeks was, huge culture shock to be living and working in the Asian environment. But Baker McKenzie is and always has been a very international firm. People have grown up and spent their careers there. They are partner in the Philippines is best friends with a partner in Brazil because they've known each other their whole career, and it felt like a small world of its own, which made things a lot easier and a very sort of open and welcoming environment. So again, once I got there, I found it very warm, very welcoming, but a very different client base that we were looking at and different expectations in terms of events and how they're all done, much more, sort of in line with local Hong Kong culture. Mm-hmm. I moved into an Asia Pacific role quite soon after moving to Hong Kong, and that gave me the chance to travel around the Asia region to Japan and to China and to Singapore and, all very different countries. And I think just being very open-minded, very respectful of the local culture helped me to quickly learn and find the right way to succeed. So, it was certainly it was an exciting time. But what I really loved was working with some of those big international companies and on the deals that you saw on the front page of the FT.
So, I mean, that's the job side of it. So talk to me about the personal side of it. So you've gone to Hong Kong, you don't probably have any friends there, and you were there for 4 years. So how did you adapt to Hong Kong? What did you do to make living in Hong Kong, an experience that you wanted it to be?
When I first moved there, I didn't know anybody, so it was quite daunting. But Baker & McKenzie is a firm which is really built in the local community. And so there was lots of social activities and opportunities to get involved in local culture. About 6 weeks after I arrived, there was a dragon boating festival. So I, volunteered to join the team and get in a dragon boat and compete for Baker & McKenzie. But really just taking up every invitation which came my way and using it as an opportunity to expand my network. Hong Kong is an expatriate environment, and people are quite transient, moving in and out all of the time, and so you build connections and make new contacts quite quickly and build really deep relationships. I mean, some of my friends that I met in Hong Kong are still friends today. I would consider them family more than friends. We go on holiday together. We're in constant contact, and you build very deep relationships because of that experience that you're going through together. But I think it was really about don't say no, open your mind to anything, and try it all out, make the most of that opportunity.
So we've done Melbourne, we've done Hong Kong, and then you go to London. Why?
I wasn't ready to move back to Australia. I felt like I wanted to move on from Hong Kong and do something different, progress with my career. Wasn't ready to move back to Australia. I did have a British passport and thought, well, I'll go to London and do my year in London like every Aussie does. And never left. It's been a fantastic experience.
And that's where you got your first proper head of BD role in London. You said earlier that it was an ambition of yours to work in the city, to work in a skyscraper, to be a head of business development or a CMO. So here we are, you're in London, one of the best cities in the world, and you've got a head of BD title for a global law firm. How are you feeling at this point in time in your career?
I mean, it's a massive sense of achievement, really. I, worked hard. I'd taken every opportunity I could, continue to build my skills and being really focused on where I wanted to get to, including asking my boss at the time for the job. Sometimes you've just got to ask when the vacancy comes up. And, thankfully I was given that chance. But it just felt really natural because of the work that I had done, being an account manager and a BDM and working on pitches and directory submissions and building lots of relationships and really trying to get a broad understanding of the firm that I was working for at the time. So it felt very natural, but it was a great opportunity to then start to build some of my own programs and to tweak things which I felt hadn't worked in the past. So it was really exciting.
A quick reflection here on how she asked for the job. I always encourage people to do this if they want it. Sometimes asking for the chance to do the job can be the differentiating factor between you and another candidate. As she rightly says, sometimes you just have to ask. Where does this sort of throw yourself into everything, say yes to everything, have as many experience, where does it come from, do you think?
I think just trying to prove to myself and to others that I can do it. I grew up in an environment where, I didn't ever feel like I was good enough. I actually remember going for an interview in a law firm. It wasn't Baker & McKenzie, it was another firm. And the managing partner saying to me that I'd never make it in law. And so his quote has stuck with me all of these years.
What's his number? What's his name? We'll send him this podcast.
It stuck with me in the back of my mind all of this time. And I've just really enjoyed working in professional services and with the people that I work with and, just wanted to keep going.
So then you moved to KPMG, one of the biggest professional services firms in the world. How did that come about?
I was really looking for a new opportunity. I'd spent, by that stage, about 14 years working in the legal sector and never thought I would be able to move out of legal, but had, spent a number of years being the number two to the director of BD at the time, and wanted that opportunity to just move out and do it for myself. So I was open to looking at opportunities and happened to be having a conversation with a recruiter who mentioned a pursuit leader role at KPMG, and he thought I'd be fantastic for it. I will be honest, I really didn't understand what pursuits meant and what the actual job was, but was told by everybody I met at KPMG that I would be fantastic. And even my director of BD, although he was sad to see me go, knew that it was a fantastic firm to move to, and sort of encouraged me to move along. So no, it was a great move. It was very daunting because I didn't know how transferable my skills were going to be and whether or not I could make it, or I was going to be on a massive learning curve. But found that my experience in legal really put me in a very strong position because I'd had a much broader scope of experience working in law than in many people in the Big Four. The Big Four is fantastic environment because it is full of lots and lots of deep subject matter experts. And so I joined a pursuit team who, were deep pursuit experts in that whole strategy of pursuing an opportunity and political analysis mapping and value proposition development and managing and coaching people to go into pitches, but coming in with a much broader skill set in BD and marketing and communications. I was able to add another perspective to the pursuits that I worked on. So it was a great move, but again, daunting.
Yeah, and there is often in our world of professional services marketing, there's often commentary that the Big Four are more sophisticated at marketing business development than the legal profession. What's your view on that?
It's different. I think the training and the professional development opportunities in the Big Four are fantastic, and I would recommend it as a job move to anybody who is considering it, because the training and that I got in those 7 years at KPMG has been phenomenal, beyond what I could imagine. In some ways, yes, they are more sophisticated, but the size of the opportunities, the relationships that they have with clients means that, that's required. They are competing against the, sort of the Accentures and the IBMs and the Microsofts of the world for, billion-dollar opportunities, really. And it's a lot more sophisticated, buying processes behind those deals than perhaps, some of the law firm relationships. But actually coming back into law, so impressed by the way that the industry has moved on and the caliber of people in BD and marketing and comms today in the legal sector. I think it's caught up very, very quickly. And in some ways, some of the programs run by law firms today are, on a par for sure.
Encouraging to hear.
Yeah.
You said that when you went over to KPMG, you had no idea what pursuits meant. I think that's like 90% of the population. I'm going to put you on the spot. What's your elevator pitch? What does pursuits mean?
For somebody in the legal world, it is a combination of account management and business development and pitching. I mean, essentially, you've got a big opportunity. A client is looking at whether it's, changing their auditor, which they now need to do by, because it's regulated, trying to buy a new tax service provider or implement a new financial system. That that particular company is going to be buying that service from somebody. And so it's the strategy behind trying to position KPMG or the firm you're working for that work. And it involves everything from really trying to scope out and understand the service or the solution offering of the company, the politics that go on behind the scenes. So, the different decision makers that are going to be involved in making that final decision and the influences around them, both within and outside of the organization, trying to understand that and how best you can tweak your pitch to try to win. It then involves really preparing people to go into these challenging and stressful pitch situations pulling together all that pitch material, the proposal documents, the commercial material, having a line of sight across that whole strategy and making sure that it is aligned and that it makes sense. If you're going in pitching that you are the most experienced firm in that sector with the strongest team and a high quality solution, you don't want to be then undercutting with a 25% discount. So you've got to ensure every part of that is aligned, and keep the momentum up and keep the focus on the client.
I must stop here. That was possibly one of the most articulate definitions of what for many is a difficult BD strategy to explain. She didn't know I was going to ask the question because I didn't know, but I'm glad I did, because in answering she demonstrates that she truly knows and understands the value that BD people have in a professional services business. And being able to confidently articulate what you do is what buys you influence and credibility. Let's go back and hear what else she can teach us. You mentioned politics there, and professional services firms, law firms, they're very political environments, and they're also very high pressure environments. And you've thrived in your career working for these organizations. Why? Why have you thrived? What is it about you that makes you able to navigate these environments well?
Try to avoid the politics. I build relationships with everybody on an equal footing and try not to get too involved in that politics. But I've also looked for firms which have been, quite open and less politically driven. I've built teams where everybody is welcome and is respected, and eliminated the sort of politics from within the team, because we're all here for one purpose at the end of the day, and that is to help our firm succeed. So, we succeed. And having that supportive environment is so important for me. So really trying to avoid that.
And now you're CMO at Walkers, which was the job you said you wanted when back in the day. I'm curious, what was the appeal of this particular job for you at that time in your career?
Yeah, again, I spent my 7 years at KPMG the last couple of years being a number 2 to our European, Middle East, Africa head of clients and markets, and really felt that I wanted to step out and be the number 1 and be in a firm where I could make an impact and pull everything I'd learned over my career together. Walkers was really interesting because it's a very different business model. Being a firm which we have 6 jurisdictions of law in Cayman, BVI, Bermuda, Jersey, Guernsey and Ireland, it's not competing with the big firms that I'd worked with before in London or in New York or in Hong Kong. Very different business model where our lawyers are situated away from our clients. We rely very heavily on referrals coming in from other law firms and from corporate service providers. And so it requires a different thinking. I can't just rely on what I've always done before. And
you've got the Asia piece again now.
I have. Yeah, it's great actually working back with people in Asia and seeing how that region has really evolved and developed over the last 10 or 12 years since I've really been there.
And you were the first CMO that Walkers have had.
Yes.
When you were at KPMG, you went over there to help build out a pursuit program. It seems that a reoccurring theme throughout your CV is about change and transformation. But I'm curious, how has your career changed and transformed you?
Oh, it's definitely made me more confident in who I am. Somebody who really enjoys meeting new people, going to new places and learning about cultures and being very open every day to doing something new and different that I hadn't done before.
And what advice would Heather today give to Heather in the year 2000, who first walked across that threshold of Baker & McKenzie in Melbourne?
Be more confident, speak up and share your views. I think I spent too much time in the early part of my career learning and listening, and should have shared or asked the questions that were sitting on the tip of my tongue, because I find now actually working with more junior people in my team, they've got some great ideas, and actually just listening to what doesn't make sense to them can make you think and look at things in a different way. So yeah, speak up and share your views.
I'm pausing again because this is great advice, particularly to people at the beginning of their careers. Speak up, share your views, ask the questions, because people do often want to hear that you have a thought, an opinion, and more importantly, if you are in marketing, they want to know that you've got an idea. Now, one of the things that we do on this podcast is that we ask the guests to give us their favourite interview question, which we then ask the next guest. So our last guest's favourite question was, which I'm now going to ask you, what do you need in your career, do you think, to be successful?
All about attitude to me. So, you talked about that can-do attitude, but I certainly hire based on attitude rather than skill set. Mm-hmm. I look for people who are curious, who are looking to learn, who are open to new ideas.
Mm. And what's your favourite interview question that we will ask the next guest?
Well, can you describe a situation where you took the initiative to accomplish a goal?
Right. Good luck, whoever gets that.
I look forward to hearing the answer.
Heather, it's delightful for me to interview you personally, because I remember meeting you in Melbourne in the year 2000 when I had only just moved to Australia. It's been an absolute pleasure watching your career go from strength to strength. I'm really proud of you, and thank you so much for coming onto the podcast today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's great to be working with you again, Graham, and seeing how your business has flourished as well. So thank you very much for having me today.
It's a pleasure.